Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good morning. First, I just want to take the time to thank you all for being attentive, patient, and understanding with all the chaos and drama that we had going on this week. Like I told you all on Tuesday morning, what you do is very important. Your job is essential to make sure that the justice system works and that it also keeps going. Now, back on Tuesday morning, I told you all how pride, animosity, holding on to unnecessary grudges, and having an overly inflated ego is just a recipe for disaster, and it can lead to a tragedy. And you all have sat here this week and heard how all those aspects pertaining to the defendant did indeed lead to the tragedy of losing two amazing young people, 16-year-old Wilson and 24-year-old Quadri Wilson. Now this week, you've all heard from several people that took their very stand over there. You got to hear their testimony, you got to watch their body language, you even got to learn a little bit about science and math. And now you get to judge their credibility. You all got to watch the surveillance footage from the new Floyd Village Apartments, located at 500 Wilson Bowie Boulevard here in King Street, South Carolina. You were able to get a glimpse of the scene of two murders. And what was that scene? A setting up for a funeral of all things, where you have a large number of family, friends, relatives, loved ones gathered together. Even in the midst of COVID, you had them coming out to pay their respects, to send their condolences, to show love to one another, to celebrate the life of one dearly departed soul. You saw a range of individuals there on the scene. You had babies and small children, you had teenagers, adults, and you even had the elderly out there. You even saw the smaller circle gathered outside where Tycee and Quadri was located at. And as you heard one of the witnesses say, that small group was just gathered together first in the name of the young lady that had passed away. And they were trying to celebrate her life by creating happy memories. They gathered together to sing songs, to rap, probably make some jokes and everything too. Trying to make the situation a little bit more lighthearted, because it's already a sad occasion when someone loses their life. Trying to put some light into the darkness that was already going on through that period of time. Then, not even within a whole minute of the defendant getting out of his girlfriend's vehicle, you heard testimony from one of the witnesses that several shots rang out, causing chaos. You see one body fall in camera, and another falls right outside the camera's view. Two lifeless bodies, two young people laid out on the cold, hard ground, causing those who are already grieving more heartache and pain, and then not to mention causing two more families unimaginable pain because they thought that their loved ones were coming home that evening. But what else do we see? We see the defendant, Marquise Devontae Franklin, traveled from the vehicle over to the small circle where Quadri were located, arms tucked and running from around the building where the camera is located. He's making a beeline back to that vehicle that he got out of. Arms tucked as if he's holding something. He makes a beeline to that vehicle, gets into the driver's seat, and he backs out and speeds through the residential area. You heard that from the young lady who was trying to render aid to the people who got shot, people who she knew her whole life. And she was going to check on their well-being to find out what had happened. He almost runs over her by how fast he's going. And you heard testimony that he was traveling at speeds excess of 70, 80, 90, even up to 100 miles per hour. Careless disregard for the scene and everything that was going on. And as he's flying through that same residential neighborhood, people are ducking down out of sheer fear of his vehicle that he's in. They stay ducked down. They stay ducked down behind mailboxes, behind the white Honda that you all saw. When his car passes by, everyone checks around. They see that their vehicle is left. They see that he is off the scene. And then they get up to check on their dear loved ones that they didn't know had lost their lives. Now we heard from Ms. Carson, the then girlfriend of the defendant. She even stated the original plan for that evening was for them to waste time. They were going to waste time as they waited for a friend, Quadacia, to get dressed so that they could go to a concert. But then he was supposed to drop her off, come back to town, do whatever he wants to do. Come back, pick her up, and then go about their business. But those plans conveniently change after the shooting takes place. All of a sudden, he needs to get dropped off in Greeleyville. And after that, it's no more concert. It's no more, let's go on a date. It's no more, let's see what else we got planned the rest of the evening. He hightails it to Cleveland, Ohio. 650 miles or more away from King Street, South Carolina. All the way to Cleveland, Ohio.
Bro, it was not gonna be nowhere around this shit. Cause if I would have dropped you off at Quadacia, I was really going to go see my brother. Then I was going out there anyway. You get what I'm saying? So the shit would have happened regardless, bro. But it was meant for this shit to happen because there wasn't no way around this shit, bro. Like,
it was meant for this to happen. Even if he dropped Miss Carson off, the defendant was still going to the setting up. And it was bound to happen. He says the shooting death of Tyson Wilson and Quadri Wilson was still going to happen, and it was all dependent on his presence at the setting up. And how do we know that that was going to happen? Because of his actions. Like an insecure little boy, he was still holding on to a petty grudge from high school. Years ago. Not days, not weeks, not months, not even hours. Years ago, from when he was in high school. You heard testimony that he went and slapped Miss Raynisha Conyers, the girlfriend of Quadri Wilson, and sends a threat. Quadri's next. And it follows up on that threat. Following the poor young lady 15 minutes from Salters to Greeleyville. 15-minute drive, and then causing a scene at her residence, trying to engage in an altercation with Quadri. 2 weeks before this shooting incident takes place. But, you know, take his word for it. What did he say?
I don't want you to say. I don't know, man. I feel like it's my fault that people hate you, but well, I know it is. Sure, every time I think about it, bro, it wasn't gonna be no way around this shit, bro. It was not gonna be no way around this shit. Cause if I would have dropped you off at Carnation, I was really going to go see my brother. Then I was going out there anyway. You get what I'm saying? So the shit would have happened regardless, bro. But it was meant for this shit to happen because there wasn't no way around this shit, bro. Like,
you also heard from the forensic pathologist, Miss Wilson suffered one gunshot wound to the back of her head. Quadri suffered 8 gunshot wounds. 1 bullet recovered from the back of his head, and 1 bullet recovered from Quadri's right arm. The cause of death for both individuals were gunshot wounds, and the manner of death, asked by the experts, was determined to be homicide. Both pathologists recovered those projectiles. It was collected, packaged, and shipped off the sled for further testing and comparison. So let's talk about what we learned there. The bullet retrieved from Quadri's right arm was not fired by the gun next to him. Not a bullet recovered in the back of her head. It was a little damaged, but the head stamp on that bullet matched that of the bullet from Quadri. 9 shell casings recovered. 8 gunshot wounds to Quadri, 1 gunshot wound to that appeared to be fired from the same weapon. The firearm expert even testified that there are 2 guns in play in this scenario. And again, you all saw the surveillance footage. We saw the defendant running behind the building, arms tucked under him, as if he's holding something. And the defendant himself even makes reference to a gun.
God, bro, if I would have got up and and went to McDonald's like I was supposed to that morning, bro, I probably would have met them bitches in the fucking parking lot or something like that. If I was jumped out the window and tried to run, they couldn't shoot me though. And they ain't had no, cause they ain't even look for no gun, they ain't found no gun, nothing like that. But if I was jumped out that window, I thought they had it going. Dude put me in handcuffs. A little short white dude, he was walking in the house and he would meet somebody who was coming out. He was like, yeah, that right there, still a deal right there. So I thought he was talking about the gun, but he wasn't talking about me. He was like, yep, that is still a deal right there. I swear to God. So I was thinking they found the phone.
They didn't look for a gun or anything. They didn't find a gun or anything. I thought they had it. I thought the man was talking about the gun. So the defendant is talking about that second gun that is missing from the scene that could have been in his hands as he was running away from the apartment. But as he said, that right there seals the deal. The big bad defendant, who was so sure of himself after running away scared, just knew in his soul and in his heart of hearts that them boys, or the more respectable term, law enforcement agents who risk their lives on a daily basis, he just knew that they had the weapon. And that right there would have sealed the deal for him. Now, like I said earlier this week, real life isn't like the TV shows. We really wish it could be. We all wish you could catch everything in 4K and high definition on cameras and have fingerprints and have all this big dramatic reviews during court. But real life just isn't like that. We don't get to have everything neatly packaged within a 30-minute time frame. But in real life, there is what we call circumstantial evidence. And circumstantial evidence is real evidence. And it requires us to use our common sense and to put the elements and the facts together. And the circumstances here are clear. The defendant had a long-standing beef or difficult history with Mr. Quadri Wilson. Both knew or were related to the deceased woman whose setting up they were at. And both men were in the scene. Unfortunately, Ms. was close to Quadri during that period of time. The defendant already threatened Mr. Wilson's life. Quadri's next. He walks towards the path, towards the circle where the two individuals are located, fires into the crowd of people, striking an innocent 16-year-old child. Cheerleader, daughter, granddaughter, sister, friend. As I stated, attending the very school across the street from where she took her last breaths. She wasn't able to attend her graduation. She wasn't able to cheer again. She wasn't able to give her mom a big hug anymore. Her life cut short prematurely. And Mr. Quadri Wilson, 24-year-old son who had recently lost his own mother, brother, cousin, dear friend, had his young life cut short, all because the defendant couldn't let go of nonsense that didn't matter anymore. He fires into the crowd with those two young lives present. He runs back to his car like a coward, changes his plans, claims he got grazed. Now, during this period of time, Winsboro Regional Hospital was about a 2-minute walk from the New Floyd Apartments. Doesn't go that direction. Goes towards Greeleyville and then runs to Cleveland, Ohio. Then once he's there, even before he gets there, he cuts off his ankle monitor. And when he gets to Ohio, he arrogantly admits on calls, I could have beat them boys. All I had to do was hide in an empty apartment. I could have jumped out the window. But I thought they had the gun. It says there's no way around the situation. Now that's pride talking there when you think there's no other alternative to handling your issues like a real man. But he had to dip. He had to dip because his mom was spazzing on him. It was going to happen regardless. The shooting death of Tycee Wilson and the shooting death of Quadri Wilson was going to happen regardless, all because of defendant. And we talked briefly about reasonable doubt, and the Honorable Judge Cothran is going to give you instruction next shortly. But with these facts and circumstances, I submit that you're going to be firmly convinced that Mr. Franklin unlawfully, pridefully, and arrogantly cut down the lives of these two dear young people. And in his own words, it was going to happen regardless. Well, now, in his own words as well, it's time to seal the deal.
Ladies and gentlemen, the state wants you to make assumptions. If you start making guesses and assumptions, it is inherently unreliable. No way around it. What did that mean? We knew he was going back out later. No way around Quadre Wilson wanting to take his life. He was going to try to kill him later if he didn't then. Perhaps that's what that meant. We don't know. Was he holding something when he was running for his life? Or was he simply holding up his pants because he wore them low like so many young people do? Don't make assumptions. This was a very tragic situation. And my heart goes out to families in this case. I have young children. Well, they're young adults. They'll always be, in my mind, young children. And this was a very tragic loss for these families. But so would be convicting the wrong person. The solicitor told you it's my job to throw doubt on the facts. That's not quite accurate. First, you have to have facts. Facts don't change. The facts in this case do not point to my client, Marquise Franklin. What do we know? We know there was a setting up. We know that a lot of people attended, including Mr. Franklin. The video that was shown is only a small shot of the entire area of the setting up. They emphasized Mr. Franklin leaving. We saw other cars leaving. We saw the one I kept referring to, the white one, when the man got into it, didn't even wait for the passenger to get in the car all the way before he started moving his. They also said there were a lot of other cars that left. Mr. Franklin, we don't know that he was the first car to leave. He was just on the video. We know there was a shooting. We know Mr. Wilson had a gun. And his DNA was on the trigger of his gun. We know there was an eyewitness. The eyewitness saw a man in a black hoodie shooting at Mr. Wilson. We know Mr. Franklin had on a light green jacket with no hood. We know Mr. Franklin was not seen with a gun, and if he was actually holding a gun when he ran back, I think the passenger in his car would have seen it. We know Mr. Franklin went to that setting up just by happen chance, because the young girl they were going to pick up was still in the shower. He didn't go out there with an attitude. He wasn't on the phone with anybody. He just went to pay his respects. We know that Mr. Franklin was either shot at himself or he happened to be in the line of fire between Mr. Wilson and the man in the black hoodie. You heard from the sled agent that it was possible that the bullet And Mr. Wilson's gun was the one that killed that young girl that night. That bullet could have very easily been shot at Mr. Franklin, grazed him and missed, and hit the young lady. We don't know if the man in the black hoodie was being shot at too or retaliating because of what Mr. Wilson did killing the young lady. We don't know. Don't make assumptions. The state has to prove every aspect of this. And that's very important to all of us. We do know that Mr. Franklin cut his ankle monitor off, and he went to Ohio. Now, is that because he thought he was being killed because there was no way around it, because Quadre Wilson was out to kill him, and he was more scared of Quadre Wilson than probation and parole? The state gave you these little snippets of conversations he had. Now, when I was talking to the investigator, at first she was like, oh, there were about 50 calls. I think she even said 30 to the solicitor. Come to find out, she finally admitted there were over 137 calls. And of 137 calls, she cherry-picked out different little snippets of things that they want to make you think he was making admissions. We don't know if it was talking about this. We don't know what it was, frankly. There was another person on the other side of those conversations. We didn't get a chance to hear from them about the context of those statements. And the state didn't even bother to contact the person. They had the phone number, didn't even bother to try. What else was incredibly concerning to me, they had an eyewitness, a man in a black hoodie. What did they do to find that man? They looked at their one small shot from that surveillance camera and said, oh, I don't see him. Okay, let's go some other route. That's all they did. I would have knocked on every door, tried to find someone who had seen that, seen something. But that didn't happen. And the investigator even admitted she herself didn't know what it meant on those phone conversations. She recalled. What was also very concerning to me was that I had to drag out of the investigator that there was an eyewitness and that they knew the suspect wore a black hoodie and did not match the description of my client. At first she tells me, oh, I don't remember, until I show her her interview. Then suddenly, yeah. And she even remembered that she didn't bother to look for him. That shouldn't have happened. The other thing several things, but another thing that was very surprising to me is, why did I have to not drag out from the SLED agent, they were very upfront about it, but why did I have to show and get testimony that the bullet from Mr. Wilson's gun could have possibly been the bullet that killed the young lady? I put that in evidence. The state didn't want you to know that. I also had to call the other SLED agents for you to know that Mr. Wilson's DNA was on the trigger of that gun. The state has a duty to show you everything. It needs to show the good and the bad to its citizens before it asks you to make such a very challenging decision as who is, guilty of what crimes. The state has tried to hide every piece of evidence in this case that shows reasonable doubt. That's sad and that's pathetic. You need to make an informed decision. You are the judges of the facts in this case. All the facts, not just the facts the state wants you to know to make their case. If that were true, there's no need for y'all, there's no need for this courtroom. We just need to be a police state like Russia. Mr. Wilson's girlfriend came in and told you they've been beefing since high school. Don't really know what that means to the extent of it. She also let you know that Mr. Wilson carries a gun. And she claims that my client shoved her. And she made a police report. That was almost 4 years ago. Nothing's happened with that. I don't know if the police believe her or what it was. What did he mean, if it is true, that my client said Mr. Wilson's next? That he's going to shove her? Shove him, rather? I don't know. But you don't jump to the conclusion that he's out to kill her. And frankly, if someone regularly carries a gun, especially to a setting up, sounds like they're beefing with a lot of people. And I'm certainly sure that night a man with a black hoodie. Only thing that they brought you is that my client did cut off his ankle monitor. That is reasonable suspicion. I'll give him that. I don't believe it's probable cause. I think it's a far cry from how to convict someone on something as serious as this. If that is all it takes to convict someone in this county, then God help every citizen of Williamsburg County. Thank God very much.
Attorney Bush had talked a lot about assumptions and about we need to focus on facts, and that the fact that facts don't change, and the facts didn't change in this situation. We saw on video that Mr. Franklin was the first car to leave. We saw that individuals ducked down and hid behind mailboxes and other vehicles until he was gone. Now, we did not hear any testimony from that stand to judge about an eyewitness. We do know that Mr. Franklin conveniently changed his plans and left the scene. We know that he cut his ankle monitor off. We know that he was traveling away at a high rate of speed of 100 miles per hour. What we don't know is if he was grazed or afraid of Mr. Wilson. Hospitals right there, sheriff office over 24/7. We know that he obviously wasn't afraid of Cothran. He followed the young lady to her and Cothran's residence to engage in a confrontation with him 2 weeks prior. So we know that Mr. Franklin is the aggressor in this situation. And we know what Mr. Franklin said about the missing gun. He thought that he had the gun. He thought they found it to seal the deal on him. What we don't know is why the defense was so adamant to paint the deceased victim as a bad guy. Why point out that he had a small amount of marijuana in his system? And even the pathologist, the expert in that field, said a cigarette will cause more damage than the tiny bit of marijuana that was in his system. Why harp on the fact that Mr. Wilson's DNA is on his gun? If it belongs to him, of course it's going to be on there. You heard testimony this morning, depending on how much, it's going to remain on there, maybe for a significant period of time. But no determination was ever found that he pulled the trigger. In fact, the firearm expert that the state presented gave evidence that the shell casings, projectiles, bullets, whatever you may call them, recovered from the scene did not and could not match those projectiles that would come from the gun that was next to Mr. Cothran Wilson. Again, the facts of the case that didn't change. Mr. was an innocent bystander at a setting up near Mr. Cothran Wilson, who we know had a history with Mr. Franklin, who we know that Mr. Franklin already tried once to physically assault. We know that once he accomplished his goal of taking out his opposition, his opposer, his enemy, whatever you may call it, he took that chance to forget all about his girlfriend, forget all about their date night plans, and to go run and hide. We know that he says it his own self, that he could have hid from them boys, that he could have beat them. We know everything that he says because he tells us in his own words. And again, we know that pride and arrogance was the downfall of these two young lives.
What she want?
In the case of the state of South Carolina versus Marquise Devontae Franklin, we, the jury, unanimously find the defendant Marquise Franklin guilty of murder of Cothran Wilson. We, the jury, unanimously find the defendant Marquise Franklin not guilty of the murder. We, the jury, unanimously find the defendant Marquise Franklin guilty of possession of a weapon during a violent crime. Signed before first.
Okay, thank you. Anything from the state before I dismiss the jury?
Nothing from the state, Your Honor.
Anything from the defense?
No, Your Honor. The 26th of 2024, he had 2 prior convictions for kidnapping. Those are indictment numbers 2015 GS 450146, and he had 2 previous convictions for burglary in the second degree violence, and those are indictment numbers 2015 GS 450146 and 2016 GS 45-0181.
Okay. Do you want to address that or anything, Ms. Butcher? You agree that he is eligible for LWI?
I understand that's no serious, and then this conviction would be as well.
Okay. He was on parole in this case when this case occurred.
He was on parole when the actions occurred, yes.
Okay, then he clearly that kidnapping qualifies as the most serious offense, or the second most serious offense. All right, Senator, on the order, you're committed to the State Department of Correction for your natural life. On possession of a weapon is 5 years to run concurrent.
This is Christian News TY. I'm Tony Conyers. Is there any newsworthy events in Williamsburg County? We will get them to you as soon as possible. If not, you can follow us on Christian News TY Facebook. You can follow us on YouTube, and you can follow us on our website.
The facts remain the same. I put my finger in the ground and I turn the world around. My name is T. Wow, 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 wow.